My name is Helena Patterson. I'm 34 years old. 3 weeks after I paid $80,000 to save my father's life, I watched him thank my brother on Facebook, a brother who never spent a single dime. 247 likes, 83 comments praising Marcus for being a real man. My brother replied with heart emojis, accepting every ounce of credit for my sacrifice. But that wasn't even the worst part. At my father's recovery party, in front of 40 guests, my mother announced that whatever I contributed came from my dead-end job anyway. She laughed. Some relatives laughed with her, and my brother, he just smiled behind his hand. She had no idea that the surgeon standing 3 feet behind her was about to change everything. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. To understand why that moment broke something inside me, I need to take you back to where it all began. Growing up in the Patterson household, I learned early that my place was somewhere near the margins. Last Thanksgiving, I drove 4 hours from Houston to my parents' home in Austin. The house smelled like roasted turkey and my mother's famous cornbread stuffing. Relatives filled every corner: aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in years. When I walked through the door, my mother was already mid-introduction with Aunt Patricia. "And this," Diane Patterson said, gesturing toward my brother with unmistakable pride, "is my son Marcus, CEO of his own tech startup." Marcus flashed his camera-ready smile. The relatives nodded approvingly. Then my mother noticed me standing there, coat still in hand. "Oh, and that's Helena." A vague wave in my direction. "She does something at a hospital." That was it. No title, no context, just something at a hospital. I took my seat at the dinner table, the chair nearest the kitchen door, as always. Marcus sat at my father's right hand, the place of honor. The thing is, I wasn't surprised. This had been the pattern my entire life. When I graduated with my MBA from Rice University, top 5% of my class, my parents didn't attend. Marcus had an important pitch meeting that day, and they couldn't possibly miss it. I crossed the stage alone, shook the dean's hand, and drove myself home. No photographs, no celebration dinner. Just a text from my mother that evening. "Congrats, sweetie. Marcus's meeting went great." I stopped competing for their attention years ago. I told myself that my work spoke for itself, that the people who mattered could see my value, but I didn't expect them to erase me entirely. I just didn't realize that my silence could be weaponized against me. To understand my family, you need to understand Marcus. My brother is 4 years older than me. Tall, charming, the kind of man who walks into a room and somehow makes everyone feel like they've known him for years. He inherited our father's easy smile and our mother's talent for saying exactly what people want to hear. He's also failed at every business venture he's ever attempted. The first startup was a food delivery app, back when the market was already saturated. My parents invested $50,000, gone within 18 months. The second was a cryptocurrency trading platform, another $30,000 from their retirement savings. The platform crashed during a market dip. Marcus called it a learning experience. The third, some vague AI consulting venture, was still limping along, hemorrhaging money every month. In total, my parents had poured over $80,000 into Marcus's dreams, the same amount I would later spend to save my father's life. Funny how that number kept appearing. But here's what really got me. Every time Marcus failed, my mother had an excuse ready. "He's learning," she'd say. "Failure is the mother of success." Meanwhile, when I was 20 and asked to borrow $500 for textbooks, she told me I needed to learn self-reliance. Marcus lived in an apartment my parents paid for. I'd been covering my own rent since I was 22. I never hated my brother for any of this. How could I? He didn't create the rules, he just benefited from them. But I was tired. bone-deep tired of being measured against someone who never had to measure up to anything. And then came January 15th, the phone call that changed everything. The call came at 7:23 in the morning. I was already at my desk, reviewing quarterly reports before my first meeting. When I saw Mom flash across my phone screen, my stomach tightened. Diane Patterson never called me, certainly not before noon. I answered on the second ring. Helena. Her voice cracked. It's your father. He collapsed this morning. They're saying it's his heart. The reports in front of me blurred. Where is he? St. Luke's Medical Center. The ambulance just brought him. They're talking about emergency surgery. Triple bypass. Helena, I don't understand what's happening. I was already grabbing my keys. I'm on my way. The drive took 42 minutes. I spent every second of it on the phone with colleagues, using my professional network to get real information. By the time I pulled into the hospital parking lot, I knew the situation was critical. 3 blocked arteries, immediate surgery required. Without intervention, my father had hours, not days. I found my mother in the ICU waiting room, her face puffy and red. Marcus stood beside her, paler than I'd ever seen him. For one strange moment, they looked small to me, fragile, like children facing something they couldn't charm or negotiate their way through. Helena. My mother reached for me, and I let her grip my arm. Thank God you're here. Through the glass partition, I could see my father, Richard Patterson, the man who once fixed radios and told me I'd do great things, lying motionless under a web of tubes and monitors. His skin was gray. His chest barely rose with each breath. I didn't see the family that had overlooked me for 30 years. I just saw my father fighting for his life. The financial coordinator arrived 20 minutes later. She was a small woman with tired eyes and a clipboard full of bad news. She explained the situation in the careful, practiced tone of someone who'd delivered this speech 1,000 times. Mr. Patterson's Medicare covers approximately 60% of the procedure costs, she said. The remaining balance comes to $80,000. We'll need a deposit of $40,000 before surgery can proceed. The number hung in the air like a physical weight. My mother's hand flew to her chest. 80,000? But we don't have... I used our savings for... She didn't finish the sentence, but I knew. The Alaska cruise, the European river tour, years of luxury travel funded by retirement accounts that were now empty. She turned to Marcus. Honey, your accounts... Marcus shook his head, his jaw tight. Everything's tied up in the company, Mom. Liquidity issues. I can maybe move some things around in a few weeks, but... A few weeks? My father didn't have a few weeks. He might not have a few hours. They turned to me. The shift was almost imperceptible. A slight rotation of their bodies, a change in the direction of their desperation. It was the first time in years they'd looked at me as someone who might actually matter. Helena, my mother's voice was thin. Do you have anything? I looked through the glass at my father, at the monitors beeping out his fragile heartbeat, at the team of nurses preparing him for a surgery that couldn't happen without payment. I'll handle it, I said quietly. Handle it? Helena, you can't possibly. Give me 30 minutes. I turned and walked toward the hallway, already reaching for my phone. I stepped into a quiet corner of the corridor, away from the chaos of the ICU. My fingers moved across the phone screen with practiced efficiency. Priority banking line. Personal account. The same motions I'd made 100 times for hospital budget transfers and capital expenditures. Good morning. First Texas Bank Priority Services. Helena Patterson. Account ending 7734. I need to initiate an immediate wire transfer. Certainly, Ms. Patterson. Amount and destination? $80,000, St. Luke's Medical Center, Patient Services. A brief pause. That's a significant transfer. I'll need to verify. Use my executive authentication code, Delta 77 Alpha. This needs to be completed in the next 15 minutes. Yes, ma'am. Processing now. Another pause. Chairman Patterson, would you like confirmation sent to your primary email? Yes. Thank you. I ended the call and stood there for a moment, watching the fluorescent lights flicker above me. I didn't notice Marcus standing at the end of the hallway until I turned around. He was watching me with a strange expression, something between confusion and suspicion. Had he heard the call? Had he caught the word chairman? If he had, he didn't say anything. He just nodded and looked away. I walked back to the waiting room. It's done, I said. The full amount. They should receive confirmation within 20 minutes. My mother stared at me. Done? 80,000? Helena, where did you— It's my money. That's all you need to know. Before she could ask more questions, a nurse appeared at the door. Family of Richard Patterson? He's being prepped for surgery now. We followed her down the hallway, and the questions stopped. For the moment, saving my father mattered more than understanding how I could afford to save him. 6 hours. That's how long we waited while surgeons rebuilt my father's heart. My mother spent the time alternating between prayer and pacing. She clutched her rosary beads until her knuckles turned white, murmuring the same phrases over and over. Marcus made phone calls in the hallway, something about investors and liquidity, always the business even in crisis. I sat perfectly still, watching the red light above the operating room door. Somewhere in those long hours, a memory surfaced unbidden. I was 12 years old, sitting on the garage floor while my father tinkered with an ancient radio he'd found at a yard sale. The thing was more rust than electronics, but he was determined to make it sing again. Hand me the small screwdriver, Helena. I passed it to him, watching his hands work with patient precision. When the static finally cleared and music crackled through the speakers, some old country song I didn't recognize, he turned to me with a grin that lit up his whole face. You see that, baby girl? You see what we did? You did it, Daddy. Nope. He shook his head firmly. We did it. You and me. And you know what? You're going to do big things someday, I can tell. It was the last time he'd said anything like that to me. After that, Marcus came home from college for the summer. Marcus needed attention. Marcus needed support. And somehow, I faded into the background. The operating room light turned off. Dr. Morrison emerged, pulling down his surgical mask. His expression gave nothing away. The surgery was successful, he said. Richard is stable. He'll need significant recovery time, but he should make a full recovery. My mother wept with relief. Marcus embraced her. I stood behind them, alone, and smiled. Recovery came slowly. My father spent 3 days in the ICU before moving to a regular room. During visiting hours, the space was never empty. My mother held vigil from morning until the nurses insisted she leave. Marcus appeared every afternoon with flowers, balloons, and his phone camera ready. I visited during the quiet hours, early mornings before work, late evenings when everyone else had gone home. It was easier that way. No competition for space. No explanations required. On the 4th night, I stopped by after a board dinner ran late. The hallways were dim, and the only sound was the soft beeping of monitors. Aunt Grace was sitting in the chair beside my father's bed. She looked up when I entered, and something in her expression made my chest tighten. Helena. She rose and embraced me. I was hoping to catch you alone. Is everything okay? Is Dad— He's fine, sleeping peacefully. She glanced toward the bed, then back at me. I've been wanting to ask you something. That money for the surgery, did you really pay for all of it? I nodded. $80,000. She shook her head slowly. And Diane's been telling everyone that Marcus handled everything. I know. Doesn't that bother you? I considered the question. Of course it bothered me. But what would fighting accomplish? My father was alive. That was what mattered. It's not the first time, I said finally. It won't be the last. Aunt Grace took my hand. I've watched your mother overlook you for years. I've never said anything, and I'm sorry for that. But Helena, You deserve to be seen. I squeezed her hand. Thank you, Aunt Grace. But we both knew that seeing and changing were two very different things. 3 weeks later, I was in my office when the notification appeared. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I'd just finished chairing a hospital board meeting, and I was reviewing the minutes before my next appointment. My personal phone buzzed, a Facebook notification from my father's account. I almost ignored it. Richard Patterson rarely posted anything more exciting than fishing photos. But something made me tap the screen. The post had a photo attached, Marcus sitting beside my father's hospital bed, grinning at the camera. Below it, my father had written, "After my recent heart attack, I was saved by the grace of God and my son, Marcus Patterson. He handled everything. The bills, the arrangements, all of it. I wouldn't be here without him. Marcus, you are the pride of this family. Thank you for saving my life. Grateful heart. My son, my hero." 247 likes, 83 comments. I scrolled through them slowly, each one landing like a small, sharp stone. Marcus is such a wonderful son. You raised him right, Richard. A real man steps up when family needs him. Proud to know you, Marcus. The Patterson family is so blessed to have a son like that. And there, in the comments, my brother had replied, "Family comes first, always. I'd do anything for you, Dad." I set the phone down. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was simply hollow. $80,000. 6 hours of surgery. Weeks of silent hospital visits in the dark. All of it credited to a man who hadn't contributed a single cent. And my brother, my charming, smiling brother, hadn't corrected a single word. I picked up the phone again and stared at the post until the words blurred. But not from tears. From disbelief. I didn't delete the Facebook app. I didn't call my mother to demand answers. I returned to work. There was a medical advisory council meeting that afternoon, routine updates on surgical protocols and equipment acquisitions. As chairman, I led the discussion with the same steady voice I'd used for years. But something had shifted inside me. A hairline crack in the armor I'd built so carefully. After the meeting adjourned, Dr. Nathan Reed approached my chair. Nathan was one of our most respected cardiac surgeons, a member of the medical advisory board and, as I'd recently learned, a close colleague of the surgeon who'd operated on my father. "Helena." He waited until the conference room had emptied. "I heard about your father. Dr. Morrison at St. Luke's mentioned the case. He said the payment came through remarkably fast." "It did. He also mentioned that the patient's daughter was the one who arranged everything." Nathan's eyes met mine directly. "I didn't realize you were Richard Patterson's daughter until Morrison told me." "Not many people do." "You kept it quiet, even from the board." "It wasn't relevant to hospital business." He studied me for a moment. "Morrison was impressed. Said whoever made that call knew exactly how to navigate emergency medical financing, like they'd done it before." I gathered my papers, keeping my expression neutral. "I'm glad the surgery was successful." "Helena." He stopped me as I reached the door. "If you ever need anything, a statement, a confirmation, anything at all, you know where to find me." I nodded, not fully understanding why he'd offered. Back in my office, I looked at the nameplate on my desk. Helena Patterson, chairman of the board. Maybe, I thought, the time for silence was finally coming to an end. The invitation arrived by text message 3 days later. "Recovery celebration for Dad, Saturday, 3 p.m., parents' house. Everyone's coming. Don't be late. Marcus." I stared at the message for a long time. Everyone's coming. As if I were an afterthought. As if my presence were optional, rather than essential. But my father was alive because of me. I would be there. Saturday came, wrapped in the golden light of a Texas autumn. I drove to my parents' house with a homemade key lime pie on the passenger seat, my father's favorite, though I doubted anyone remembered that. The driveway was packed. Cars lined both sides of the street. Through the windows I could see balloons and movement. the shapes of family members I hadn't seen in years. I took a breath and walked to the front door. My mother opened it before I could knock. Oh, Helena. Her eyes swept over me once, a quick assessment that found me lacking. You made it. Put that pie thing in the kitchen. Try not to get in the way. It's Marcus's day. She turned and disappeared back into the crowd. I stood in the entryway, pie in hand, and looked around. The living room was transformed. Streamers hung from the ceiling. A banner stretched across the main wall, professionally printed. Welcome back, Richard. Thank God and thank Marcus. And there, in the center of the room, my brother held court. Marcus stood surrounded by relatives, his hand resting modestly on his chest as he recounted some story I couldn't hear. Whatever he was saying made Uncle Robert laugh and clap him on the shoulder. My father sat on the sofa of honor, thin but smiling. He watched Marcus with unmistakable pride. I set the pie in the kitchen and found a corner to stand in. Some things never changed. At 4 o'clock, my mother clinked a fork against her wine glass. Everyone, everyone, may I have your attention, please? The room gradually fell silent. 40 faces turned toward Diane Patterson, who stood beside my father's chair with the practiced poise of a woman who'd been commanding attention her entire life. Thank you all for coming to celebrate Richard's recovery. Her voice wavered with practiced emotion. 3 weeks ago, we almost lost him. But thanks to God's grace and our wonderful son Marcus, Richard is still with us today. Applause rippled through the room. Marcus handled everything during those terrible days, the hospital, the finances, all of it. He never left his father's side. She reached out to touch Marcus's arm. We are so blessed to have a son like him. More applause. Marcus ducked his head in what I'd come to recognize as his trademark humble gesture. And now, my mother continued, Marcus would like to say a few words. My brother stepped forward, one hand pressed to his heart. I don't know what to say. His voice was thick with emotion. When Dad collapsed, I knew I had to step up. That's what a son does. That's what family does. He looked at our father. I'd do it again 1,000 times, Dad. You're my hero. The applause was thunderous. Uncle Robert shouted, That's a real man right there! I watched from my corner, gripping my glass of water so tightly I thought it might shatter. Then my father spoke, his voice thin but clear. Thank you, son. I don't know where I'd be without you. No one looked at me. No one even seemed to remember I was in the room. And then my mother turned. She turned directly toward my corner. Oh, my mother's voice carried across the room. I almost forgot. Helena is here too. 40 heads swiveled toward my corner. Helena did contribute something to your father's care. Diane's smile was thin, performative. We should thank her for that. I set down my water glass, waiting. Of course, whatever Helena gave came from that little dead-end job of hers. My mother laughed lightly. But every penny counts, doesn't it? We should be grateful for crumbs. Scattered laughter from a few relatives. Marcus pressed his hand to his mouth, barely concealing a smirk. What does Helena do again? Cousin Patricia asked. Something at a hospital. My mother waved dismissively. Paperwork, I think. Or maybe reception? I honestly don't keep track. More quiet laughter, the pitying kind. I felt Aunt Grace's eyes on me from across the room. Her expression was pained. Well, Uncle Robert said jovially, at least she's got a job, right? That's something. The room buzzed with murmured agreement. Poor Helena. Always trying. Never quite measuring up. I stood perfectly still. Something inside me, something that had been held together by wire and hope for 30 years, finally snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet internal break, like a bone that had been bent too many times. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could say a word, the doorbell rang. My mother's face transformed instantly. irritation smoothing into gracious hostess. That must be Dr. Reed. She rushed to the door. He said he might stop by. She pulled the door open wide. And there, standing on the threshold in a casual blazer, was Dr. Nathan Reed, the man who knew exactly who I was. Okay, pause here for a second. I need to ask you something. Put yourself in my shoes right now, standing in that room. 40 people looking at you with pity. Your mother just called your career a dead end. Your brother is smiling behind his hand. What would you do? Drop your answer in the comments. I really want to know. And if you're feeling this story, hit that like button. Now, let's continue. Dr. Nathan Reed stepped through the doorway with an easy smile. Mrs. Patterson, thank you for the invitation. My mother practically glowed. Dr. Reed, we're so honored you could make it. You must come meet Richard. He's been wanting to thank you properly. Actually, Nathan said gently, I should clarify. Dr. Morrison performed the surgery. I'm merely a colleague who wanted to check on the patient's recovery. Oh, of course, of course. Diane waved away the distinction. Please, come in. Can I get you something to drink? She guided him into the living room, past the banner, past the crowd of relatives who parted respectfully for a man in a doctor's blazer. And then Nathan's gaze swept across the room and found me. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, at finding me tucked into a corner like a forgotten piece of furniture. Ah. My mother noticed the direction of his look. That's my daughter, Helena. She works at a hospital, too. Nothing like your work, of course. Some administrative thing, filing paperwork. Nathan's brow furrowed slightly. I'm sorry, he said slowly. Did you say Helena works at a hospital? Yes, well, works. Diane made air quotes with her fingers. Whatever entry-level position she managed to get, she's not on the same level as real medical professionals, obviously. Nathan stared at my mother as if she were speaking a foreign language. Then he looked at me again. Our eyes met across the crowded room. I gave a small shake of my head. A signal, don't. But something in Nathan's expression had already changed. He looked at my mother, then at Marcus, then back at me. And I could see it. The exact moment he decided he wasn't going to stay silent. I made my choice in the space between heartbeats. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my purse and withdrew my hospital badge, the one I never wore around family, the one that bore my name in bold letters above a title they'd never bothered to learn. I clipped it to my blouse. Nathan saw it first. His face broke into a smile of recognition. Well, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet room. I had no idea you were Richard Patterson's daughter, Chairman. That explains why the financial processing was so efficient. The word hung in the air like a struck bell. Chairman. My mother's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. I'm sorry. What did you call her? Chairman Patterson. Nathan's tone was matter-of-fact, professional. Helena and I serve together on St. Crestwood Memorial's Advisory Council. She chairs the entire hospital board. He turned to me with genuine warmth. I have to say, the way you handled your father's case was remarkable. Dr. Morrison couldn't stop talking about it. The room had gone absolutely silent. Marcus stood frozen, his face draining of color. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. My mother's hand began to tremble. Red wine sloshed dangerously close to the rim of her glass. Chairman, she repeated, the word barely a whisper. Helena is a chairman? Of one of the largest hospitals in Houston, yes. Nathan seemed genuinely confused by the shock in the room. Did you not know? Uncle Robert leaned toward Aunt Grace. Wait, St. Crestwood? That's the hospital that just built that new cancer wing. My buddy works construction, said it's $100 million facility. From his place on the sofa, my father stared at me. For the first time in decades, he truly saw me. The silence stretched like a held breath. There must be some mistake. My mother's voice had gone high and thin. Helena doesn't, she can't possibly. She turned to Marcus, desperate. Marcus handled the finances. Marcus paid for everything. I reached for my phone. Did he? My voice was calm. Because I have the receipt right here. I pulled up the email, the confirmation I'd saved, knowing somehow that this moment might come, and held the screen where everyone could see. $80,000. Wire transfer from my personal account. Dated January 15th. Sender, Helena M. Patterson. My mother crossed the room in 3 unsteady steps. She stared at the screen, her face gone white as paper. That's your account? That's your money? My money, my transfer, my decision. Dr. Reed stepped forward. I can confirm this. St. Luke's financial office informed me that Ms. Patterson processed the full payment within 30 minutes of receiving the cost estimate. Dr. Morrison said he'd never seen anyone navigate emergency financing so quickly. The murmuring started then, a wave of whispered confusion rippling through the crowd. 80,000. She paid all of it? But Marcus said. Marcus finally found his voice. Helena, why didn't you say something? I turned to face my brother directly. I did say something. I said I would handle it. You weren't listening. He flinched as if I'd struck him. But the Facebook post, Cousin Patricia started. The Facebook post, I said quietly, thanked Marcus for something he never did. 247 people liked a lie. And my brother, I looked at Marcus again, had every opportunity to correct it. He chose not to. The room seemed to contract around us, and still, no one knew what to say. Marcus stepped toward me, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. You don't understand. People just assumed. I didn't want to embarrass you by making a big deal about the truth? I cut him off. You had 247 comments, dozens of opportunities. You replied to those comments, Marcus. You accepted their praise. He had no response. My mother tried next. Helena, sweetheart, we didn't know. How could we possibly have known? You never tell us anything. You never ask. The words came out steady without heat. 10 years of building my career, 10 years of promotions and accomplishments. Did you ever once ask me what I actually do? Well, you're always so busy. Last Thanksgiving, I tried to tell you about my appointment as chairman. Do you remember what happened? My mother's face went blank. You interrupted me. You said Marcus's startup pitch was more important. You changed the subject before I could finish my sentence. The memory seemed to surface behind her eyes. Her mouth opened, then closed. I stayed quiet because I thought my work spoke for itself, I continued. But I was wrong. Silence doesn't speak. It just makes you invisible. Helena, my mother's voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. You didn't realize because you didn't want to realize. From the sofa, my father spoke. His voice was weak but clear. Helena, come here. I crossed the room and stood before him. He reached up and took my hand, his grip fragile but warm. I'm sorry, baby girl. Tears glistened in his eyes. I stopped seeing you. Somewhere along the way, I just stopped. And that's on me. It was the first honest thing anyone in my family had said to me in years. 40 pairs of eyes waited for my next move. I could feel their tension, the collective held breath of a family bracing for an explosion. They expected rage. They expected accusations. Maybe they even expected me to walk out and never come back. Part of me wanted to, but that wasn't why I'd come. I didn't come here to humiliate anyone, I said finally. I came because my father just survived something that should have killed him. I wanted to see him healthy. I wanted to be part of his recovery. I looked at my mother, then at Marcus. But I also need you to understand something. I'm not asking you to celebrate my career. The people who matter in my professional world already know my value. I paused. What I need is for my family to stop erasing me. Marcus nodded quickly. I'll fix the Facebook post. Tonight. I'll make it right. And from now on, I continued, if either of you says something untrue about me in front of others, I will correct it. Immediately. I'm done protecting your comfort at the expense of my dignity. My mother was crying now, mascara tracking down her cheeks. Helena, I'm sorry. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. I believe you, Mom. I reached out and touched her arm. And I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean we go back to the way things were. Things have to change. She nodded, unable to speak. I turned back to my father and took his hand again. I'm glad you're okay, Dad. That's what matters most. He squeezed my fingers. I love you, baby girl. I should have said it more. I should have seen you. You see me now, I said softly. That's a start. Quick question for you. What would you do if you were in my position right now? Would you walk away completely? Would you give them another chance? Or something else entirely? I made my choice, and I'll tell you how it turned out. But first, tell me your answer in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. The ending might surprise you. Marcus kept his word. That evening, while I drove back to Houston, my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. I pulled over at a rest stop to read it. Marcus had written a new post, this time with no photo, just a simple black background and white text. I need to correct something important. The surgery that saved my father's life, all $80,000 of it, was paid for entirely by my sister, Helena Patterson. Not by me. Helena is the chairman of the board at St. Crestwood Memorial Hospital, one of the largest medical centers in Houston. She acted immediately when Dad collapsed, and she never asked for credit or recognition. I should have set the record straight from the beginning. I'm sorry for letting people believe something that wasn't true. Helena, you deserve so much better than the way we've treated you. Thank you for saving Dad's life. 312 comments within the first 2 hours. I scrolled through them slowly. Wait, Helena is a hospital chairman? That's incredible. Wow, so Marcus didn't pay anything? That's kind of messed up. Helena Patterson, I remember her from high school. Always knew she'd do something amazing. Props to Marcus for owning up to this. But Helena is the real hero here. Some comments were less forgiving. Why did Marcus let this lie go on for 3 weeks? Imagine your own family taking credit for saving your life. That's cold. I didn't reply to any of them. I just clicked the reaction button, a simple thumbs up, and put my phone away. The record had been corrected. The truth was finally public. I didn't need anything more than that. But something had shifted. Something that couldn't be unshifted. And I wondered what would come next. The phone call came a week later. I was reviewing construction bids for the hospital's new East Wing when Aunt Grace's name flashed on my screen. Helena, honey, do you have a minute? I set down my pen. Of course. Is everything okay? Oh, everyone's fine. Your father's recovering well. She paused. I'm calling about your mother, actually. I leaned back in my chair. What about her? She's been having a rough time. Aunt Grace's voice was careful, measured. The women in her church group, they saw Marcus's post. And they've been, well, they haven't been kind. I felt an unexpected pang of something, not satisfaction, something more complicated. What are they saying? Margaret Johnson said it to her face at Bible study. Diane, I never would have thought you capable of treating your own daughter that way. Linda Peters apparently hasn't spoken to her since the party. A heavy sigh. Your mother's social standing has taken quite a hit. I closed my eyes. I didn't want that, Aunt Grace. I know you didn't, sweetheart. But you didn't create this situation. You just stopped covering it up. Still nothing. Her voice sharpened. Your mother spent decades building a narrative where you didn't matter. Consequences exist. She's learning that now. I was quiet for a long moment. Do you think she'll actually change? I think she has to. A pause. For what it's worth, she's been talking about you differently, actually listening when people ask about your work. That's something, isn't it? I suppose it is. Give it time, Helena. Some lessons take longer than others to sink in. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my office. I didn't want my mother humiliated, but I also couldn't shield her from the truth anymore. 2 weeks after the party, Marcus called. I was at home finally. A rare evening without board meetings or fundraising dinners. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Helena. His voice was different, smaller somehow. Do you have time to talk? Go ahead. Not on the phone. Can we meet? Coffee or something? I thought about saying no. I thought about the years of smug smiles and stolen credit and comfortable ignorance. But I said yes anyway. We met at a cafe near the hospital. Marcus looked tired in a way I'd never seen before. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his jaw, none of his usual polish. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he said after we'd ordered. About what happened, about the last 10 years. And? He stared into his coffee. I spent my whole life coasting, Helena. Mom and Dad made everything easy for me. And I just let them. I never questioned it. I never looked at what they were doing to you. No, you didn't. That day at the hospital, when you made that call, when you paid the money, I heard someone call you chairman. I thought I'd misheard. He laughed bitterly. I couldn't even conceive that my little sister had accomplished something that big. That says more about you than about me, Marcus. I know. He finally met my eyes. I'm shutting down the company, the AI consulting thing. It's a joke and we both know it. I raised an eyebrow. And then what? Then I get a real job. Start over. Stop relying on Mom and Dad to fund my fantasies. It was, perhaps, the first genuinely mature thing my brother had ever said. That's a start, I told him. He nodded slowly. It's a start. 3 months passed. Spring arrived in Houston, bringing warm rain and blooming azaleas. My father's recovery continued, slow but steady, exactly as Dr. Morrison had predicted. The hospital board approved our expansion plans. Life moved forward. And then my mother called with an invitation. Sunday dinner, she said, her voice almost shy. Just family. I'm making honey-glazed ribs. Your father's been asking for them. I recognized the gesture for what it was. Honey-glazed ribs had always been my favorite, not my father's. That Sunday, I drove to Austin with a bottle of wine and carefully managed expectations. My mother met me at the door. She looked older than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time. Helena. She pulled me into a hug. I'm so glad you came. The house smelled like slow-cooked meat and caramelized sugar. My father sat in his usual armchair, thinner than before but with color back in his cheeks. The dinner was quiet, peaceful even. And then, midway through the meal, my mother set down her fork. I've been wanting to ask you something, Helena, about your work. I looked up, surprised. What about it? The chairman position. What does that actually involve? I mean, she seemed to struggle with the words. I'd like to understand, if you want to tell me. Marcus caught my eye from across the table. He gave a small nod of encouragement. It's a lot of responsibility, I said slowly. Budget oversight, strategic planning, advocating for patients who can't advocate for themselves. My mother listened, actually listened. And when I finished, my father reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. I'm proud of you, baby girl, he said quietly. I should have said it years ago. I smiled. Better late than never. After dessert, I asked my mother to step outside with me. We stood on the back porch, looking out at the garden where my father used to grow tomatoes before his heart started failing. The evening air was cool and smelled like jasmine. Mom, I said carefully, I need to say something. She turned to face me, hands clasped in front of her, waiting. I forgive you, for everything. I mean that. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. Helena, let me finish. I kept my voice gentle but firm. I forgive you, but I also need you to understand that things can't go back to how they were. She nodded, not speaking. If you or Marcus ever say something untrue about me, to relatives, to friends, to anyone, I'm going to correct it. Right there, right then. No more silence from me. No more protecting anyone's pride at my expense. That's fair. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing it because I need to protect myself. I've spent 30 years making myself small so this family could be comfortable. That's over now. My mother reached out and took my hands. You're right, she said. You're right about all of it. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Helena, but I'm grateful for it. You're my mother. I love you. I squeezed her fingers. But I've learned that I have to love myself too. Those things don't have to be in conflict. She pulled me into an embrace, tighter than any hug she'd given me since I was a child. I'm sorry, baby, she whispered into my hair. I'm so sorry. I know, Mom. We stood there for a long time, watching the stars emerge over my father's garden. Something old was ending. Something new was beginning. Later that night, I sat in my car outside my parents' house, not yet ready to drive away. The dashboard clock glowed green in the darkness. Through the living room window, I could see my father settling into his armchair, my mother bringing him a cup of tea, normal moments, family moments, moments I'd almost stopped believing could include me. I looked at my hospital badge, still clipped to my purse. Helena Patterson, chairman of the board. 10 years to earn those words. 10 years of late nights and hard decisions, and proving myself to everyone, except the people who should have believed in me from the start. I'd spent so long thinking that my work spoke for itself. That if I just achieved enough, accomplished enough, succeeded loudly enough, my family would eventually have to see me. I was wrong. Some people don't see you until you force them to look. I started the car and pulled away from the curb, watching my parents' house grow smaller in the rearview mirror. I didn't regret paying for my father's surgery, I never would. But I also didn't regret standing in that crowded living room and refusing to be invisible anymore. Silence can be armor, but it can also be a cage. I'd worn mine for 30 years. It was time to take it off. The Houston skyline glittered ahead of me, bright with possibility. I didn't know exactly what the future held for me and my family. The wounds were deep, and healing would take time. But for the first time in my life, I knew they saw me. And from now on, I would never let anyone make me invisible again. Not even the people I loved, especially not them. That's my story. The story of how I stopped being invisible and started being heard. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been overlooked by the people who should have seen you the most? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. If this story meant something to you, subscribe and check the description for more stories like this. Until next time, remember, your silence is powerful, but so is your truth.